Hey guys, and welcome to Poppa's Picks on FantasyDonks.com, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know to start playing daily fantasy football. In the Poppa's Picks segment, we're just going to give you my picks for the week in daily fantasy football. We're going to give you the top 5 at each position, maybe a couple other guys here and there sprinkled in, and try to get you guys that will produce the most points for a given week and give you the best chance of cashing out in your tournaments. So let's go first to the quarterback position. And in the quarterback position, I've ranked in my number 1 spot, Jay Cutler. Now, Jay Cutler is playing the Buffalo Bills at home, and I believe that with the departure of Jarius Byrd for the Buffalo Bills, that secondary is going to be sketch and need and give up a lot of points. And Cutler has some awesome weapons, and we'll get to those a little bit later in the wide receiver section. So Cutler's my number 1 choice there. Number 2 is Foles and his play versus Jacksonville. The Eagles' high-powered offense it just puts up fantasy points like nothing. Foles had 2 interceptions all of last year. It's a great matchup. Jacksonville is usually abhorrent. Foles will get his points, and his price tag isn't too crazy. The third quarterback is Colin Kaepernick, and I think you're going to hear me pick on the Dallas Cowboys quite a bit this year. And to be honest, I'm going to, because their defense is abhorrent, and I'm going to keep picking on them and playing players that are playing against them until their defense proves otherwise. And I just think that Colin Kaepernick in this game, even though it's at Dallas, is going to put up big numbers, especially since so far the signs are San Francisco's defense is sketch, to say the best, is sketch at the least. So I think that if you go with Kaepernick, you're probably going to get at least to the baseline of 20, which is the important point line for quarterbacks. And I think you can do it at a significant discount over the super elites that cost a lot more money. My fourth play of the week is that of Carson Palmer versus San Diego. Now, if you followed fantasy football at all last year, you know San Diego has an abhorrent defense. They give up tons of points to opposing quarterbacks. But the other thing here is the Andre Ellington injury. And I think the Andre Ellington injury is going to force the Cardinals to actually have to throw the ball even more, and that'll increase Carson Palmer's value. Now, remember, Carson Palmer is one of the cheaper quarterbacks that is a starter, and if he can hit that 20 line and get above it, say like 25 to 28 points, I am able to play studs at wide receiver or at running back, and I'm going to be crushing my competition who overpays for Drew Brees or Peyton Manning. Don't get me wrong, I love both Peyton Manning and Drew Brees this week, but even at their top ceiling, with these other guys that are cheaper that have great matchups, what you're going to see is that if they can close that gap at all, I can get a gap by getting ahead at the other positions at wide receiver, running back, or tight end. Now, my fifth pick each week and of each category, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end, is going to be what's called the risk-reward play. Now, I'm going to name this week's risk-reward play at quarterback Derek Carr against the New York Jets. Now, I know you're probably saying a rookie quarterback on the road in New York, their pass rush is fierce. Couldn't agree more. Their pass rush is amazing. However, their corners are abhorrent, and one of their corners, the corner they signed, just decided to disappear and walk away from the team. They're literally starting guys that are garbage at at wide receiver. At cornerback, excuse me. So that wraps it up. But like I said, though, Derek Carr being the rookie with the Raiders, it's questionable, but if he pays off, since he's a min-cost quarterback on all the sites, you will make up so much ground on the competition. Let's now go to running backs. My number one overall running back, no surprise, as you can see from the wall behind me, is, as a Chiefs fan, is Jamal Charles. Look, like, I'm not even saying the Chiefs are going to win this game, but what I am going to say is that the Chiefs offense runs solely through Jamal Charles, even more so this week with the absence of Dwayne Bowe due to a suspension. Now, you have to pay up for Jamal Charles, but if you do, I think he's going to score enough points to make it worth it. The next players that I have are, I'm going to give you a two for here in the 2 slot, and that's Reggie Bush and Joique Bell for the Lions. They play the Giants at home, and the Giants are a well below average run defense. Also in this equation is the Giants' offense has been looking terrible, turning over the ball a lot, getting a lot of sacks. So what that equates to in my mind is good field position for the Lions. Now, when the Lions have good field position, the higher propensity it is for the running backs to score. And on DraftKings, where I'm getting 1 point per reception, both Bush and Bell are very attractive options. Bell even more so because he's a cheaper price tag. So look to that play if you're interested in that game. The next running back that I'm really interested in this week is CJ Spiller. He's playing at Chicago, and there's a lot of problems with that team right now, but the one problem doesn't seem to be the running game, right? CJ Spiller has the ability to go crazy when he's healthy, and right now he's healthy, so I'd roll the dice against Chicago, which was a bottom 3 run defense last year in the NFL. The only bad beat you can take with playing Spiller is well, there's two. Is the injury, or if Freddie Jackson decides to beast up and steal some points, which also means Fred Jackson might make a good contrarian play for these tournaments. You might want to throw a dart at Fred Jackson instead of CJ Spiller. Save money that allows you to beast up at wide receiver or tight end. That's just an option. My next choice is Frank Gore. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say Frank Gore's old and broke, and this year is going to be the year for Carlos Hyde. And guys, we've heard it year after year after year. And like I said before, I'm picking on Dallas. They are a dumpster fire of a defense. And if Frank Gore is ever going to have a beast of a day, it's going to be this Sunday at Dallas. And his price tag is just too hard to pass up because, like I said, as cheap as he is on both FanDuel and on DraftKings, it allows me to beast up at other positions. So if I'm looking to play beast wide receiver this week, Frank Gore is definitely somebody I'm looking at. Now, the last play I have, which is the risk-reward play, is that of CJ2K, Chris Johnson. Now, in the past couple of years, Chris Johnson has fallen off a bit and not produced the monster totals that we saw a couple years back. But he is playing the Raiders. And last year, if you look at fantasy football, the Raiders gave up the #1 games to fantasy running backs multiple times. And when they didn't give up the #1 game, most times the running back that played against them was in the top 5. So I think that even though CJ2K has a little bit of miles on him, and there are other backs in that stable in New York, I think CJ2K can still put up the good points. I mean, let's be honest, all he has to do is break one for a touchdown against the Raiders, either passing or catching, and he's automatically got you at the good baseline for a cheap running back. And his price tag is so good that you can easily play him and Frank Gore and go superstar at wide receiver with one of the value quarterbacks that I would mention. But now that brings us to the wide receiver section of Poppa's Picks. And the #1 wide receiver I have on the board today is Desi B. Now, I know I've talked about how garbage the Cowboys defense is, and actually that feeds to why Dez Bryant is even a more lucrative fantasy play this week, right? As bad as their defense is, that'll mean San Francisco is going to score a lot of points. When San Francisco scores a lot of points, that means Dez Bryant, who's the focal point of the Dallas Cowboys offense, will get heavily involved and should have a monster day. He does have a high price tag, but it's not as high as Megatron or some of the other guys that And it's just enough of a savings that it allows you to put together a really good roster. The second wide receiver that I really like this week is Brandon Marshall. Now, I know a lot of the other sports writers out there are really high on Alshon Jeffries, and I can't fault them. They both might have beast days. But I'm going to pick Brandon Marshall, and Brandon Marshall is going to be the player I'm rolling with this week against Buffalo. Like I said, Jerry Spurd gone from that secondary. I think that they're going to give up a lot of yardage. I think that could be a very one-sided affair, other than possibly the 1 to 2 touchdowns on the ground from C.J. Spiller, Fred Jackson. I really like the Bears play this week against Buffalo. As you can tell, if I were you, I'd get a piece of it as well. My third wide receiver is that of Larry Fitzgerald, and basically any of the targets for Carson Palmer. I covered this a little bit earlier when I was telling you about Carson Palmer and why I thought he was a good play. But when you break it down, the simple truth of the matter is if Ellington's injured, if Ellington's out, they are left basically passing the ball because they have a back that gains less than 3.5 yards a carry, which is terrible. I would go with Fitz, but a lot of people are pumping up Floyd, and a lot of people were early in the preseason talking about John Brown. Now, if you're going to make a contrarian play, or you're trying to super spend elsewhere, John Brown is close to minimum value, or if not minimum, and could save you a lot of money and could be a sexy target that not a lot of people would have in a tournament. And if he performs, you could jump a lot of people, but it's a high risk play there. My fourth pick of the week is that of Emmanuel Sanders. He was earlier in the season, he was going to be my number one pick of the week, and I was going to surprise you all. But he had a beast last game of the preseason, the third game of the preseason, where he showed everybody that he was legitimately one of Peyton Manning's targets, that he could easily step into Eric Decker's role. On top of that, Wes Welker then gets suspended for amphetamines. And that means that it's between Demaryius, him, and Julius Thomas basically in the passing game. I'm not going to play the guessing game with the rookie and Latimer. That's just not what I'm going to do. So I think Sanders is going to be keen for a big day against the Colts. The Colts defense is pretty bad. You can play any of those Peyton Manning targets and feel comfortable, but just remember, he's the best priced one unless you want to dip down and try to throw a dart at Latimer or Caldwell. They will be cheaper, but they're higher risk, in my opinion. The fifth, which is my risk reward play of the week and wide receiver, is that of Brandon Cooks in New Orleans. I wouldn't have made this play until I saw the news today where New Orleans reports that Kenny Stills is out with an injury. The Falcons defense is terrible, but my focus was on Jimmy Graham because they have so many targets to spread the ball around other than Jimmy Graham that it becomes a guessing game. I think with Stills going down though, Cooks, that's now playing the quasi-Sproles-ish role from what people are reporting, but with more of a receiver upside even than Sproles was. I think Cooks could have a monster game. I think that he might be a really good play for you, and he's really, really cheap on all the sites. So I will be playing Cooks a couple of times, just to let you know, and that's why I like him as my risk and reward play. That leaves us to the last group that we're going to cover, which is tight ends. The first tight end I have, of course, is Jimmy Graham at Atlanta. That matchup's just juicy, as we've all seen on Hard Knocks. Atlanta's defense looks sketch, to say the least. Plus, I mean, it's Jimmy Cocoa Puff, right? You can't, when Jimmy plays, for the most part, you can pencil in basically a close to a 20-point day, and he has the upsides of 35, and he's significantly cheaper. The tight end position is significantly cheaper than wide receiver, so if you want to stud up easily on Graham, feel free to go ahead and do it. It's a fairly easy play to make, but you're going to see there's some other tight ends that also have juicy matchups. The second one that I have is that of Gronk, and Gronk is at Miami. People are really worried about the injury. Gronk came out and said he was medically cleared to play. Belichick then said that he was going to make the decision. That's all Belichick said. It's the usual Patriot way, right? Like Tom Brady's been listed as questionable since he came into the league and started playing quarterback. Every week he's listed as questionable. I believe Gronk's going to play. If for some reason he doesn't play, pull him out of your lineups. You can do it before the games start. I think he's such a lock to play that I would feel comfortable setting him in a roster and not worrying about it at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And we all know that when Gronk does play, Gronk beast, right? Like, Gronk like to catch ball. Like the third tight end that I have is Vernon Davis, and once again, I'm picking on Dallas. Dallas is terrible. They don't have any linebackers. That means they don't have anybody legit to cover Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis could have a monster game, just catching ball after ball from Kaepernick. I mean, and we saw his ceiling last year with that 40-plus pointer against Arizona. Dallas could be just as bad. You might even be able to get that kind of crazy high ceiling out of him, and that would be awesome. But I think worst case scenario, you're going to be safe for a very good game out of Vernon Davis against the Cowboys. The next play is that of Selleck for the Eagles versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are terrible again. I've been on this again, and we know how much the Eagles like to run at a high tempo offense and how much they like to throw the ball and spread it around. I think that Selleck at his almost minimum price tag is well worth the investment, and he has a chance, if things break right, to compete with the Grahams and Gronks and BDs of the world. But I just like all three of those guys' matchup just a little bit better, and I would rather pay more money for the better matchup for the more sure thing, right? Like those guys are all their primary team's targets versus Selleck, which is, we don't know in the order, right? Like he could be second to Macklin, he could be third behind Macklin and Cooper. He could, like, I don't know, and it's a guessing game, so I'm not going to claim to know. Just but it is a good matchup. Also, that, like, as you heard from my analysis there, Cooper and Macklin are plays at wide receiver that you could make as well. But my last in the risk reward play, and this could be the, like, if I had to guess, this might be the play that determines who wins the big tournaments this week on both of the sites. And as I mentioned previously when talking about a couple teams, Arizona was the worst team. When talking about the Cowboys, Arizona was the worst team in the league last year against tight ends. 32nd, dead last. Every tight end that played Arizona beasted except for one, right? I think that legit tight ends. Let me rephrase that. I think that you can play Gates or Green here and score good points. But that's the risk and reward part of the equation, right? We don't know which one of the two guys it's going to be. If I had a gun to my head and had to make a decision, I would go Gates, just because he's the veteran, and we saw that Gates came out of the gate fast and strong last year. And at his age, if he's going to put up numbers, it's going to be in the first few games. I would go with him over Ladarius Green. I think that that's a good play. I wouldn't fault anybody that makes it. But if one of those guys goes off, right, and the other one gets shut out, that guy might be the difference maker in all the tournaments. So I hope you liked Poppa's picks this week. I'll be honest, we don't break down defenses, and we don't break down kickers at all. Kickers are a complete crapshoot, and you might as well just bet on a number on a roulette wheel if you want advice on a kicker. No true fantasy player that knows what they're doing will tell you can predict kickers. And as far as defenses go, just go with your gut. Defense scoring is so fluky because all their points are scored from interception returns for touchdowns, or fumbles for touchdowns, or kickoff punt returns for touchdowns, and there's no one that can really predict that. Like Like, there are some teams that have a little bit better propensity to do it, but in the grand scheme of things, like, no one can really predict it. So go with your gut, go with the matchup you feel on defenses, and if you have to, because you're on a site that's playing kickers, do the same with kickers. Best of luck to you. I hope you enjoyed this 20-minute long video where we broke down like my top 5 players at each position. If you want it shorter and more condensed, let me know. I'm here to give you guys what you want. But I want to tell you that the purpose of FantasyDonks.com is to educate you as a fantasy football player and help you start making the decisions for yourself, right? Like, let's be honest. If the people out there that are claiming that they have the perfect lineups really did have the perfect lineups, they would all be multimillionaires and would never share their information because it wouldn't be profitable. What we do here at Fantasy Donks that nobody else does is we try to educate you as the fantasy player, because ultimately you are the ones that are making the best decisions. I have done some of the work for you, but in order for you to be super successful, you need to do some of the work on your own. And that's what we try to encourage here at FantasyDonks.com, because we understand that there's no one that can see into a crystal ball. And if you could, you should go fill out Powerball tickets, because you would be a multimillionaire. Anyways, after that rant, I hope you enjoyed this segment of Poppa's Picks on FantasyDonks.com. If you're checking out this video on Facebook, feel free to stop by the site. We break down all the daily sites, and you can talk to me or any of the other contributors directly. Once again, I'm Sean Big Poppa Williams, and you guys have a great Sunday fun day, and hopefully we make a lot of money this week. Bye.